Hey traders, in this lesson I want to show you how to create an indicator that draws custom bars onto our charts based on the price action that unfolded during certain trading sessions. So if I open up the settings menu here, you can see I have the US trading session, the Tokyo trading session, and the London trading session inputted into my settings as session inputs. And my script here is plotting custom bars based on how price action unfolded during those sessions. So if I open up the source code and scroll down, so the blue bar you see here is the New York session, the US session. And what it's telling me is that when price began trading in the US session, price opened on this little blue line here, all the way over here on one of these bars. It rallied all the way up to here. This is the high of the session, the trading session, and then it fell all the way down here to the low of the session and closed on this bar here. Where the blue bar's plotting is where the session closed. And so when the next session begins, I can use this previous trading session to reference for things like support and resistance, and there's a million ways you can apply this sort of information. That's not the purpose of today's lesson. Today's lesson is just to show you how you can use custom bar plotting and session inputs to create a interesting trading tool in PineScript. So let's open up a blank script and get started. So what we have here is essentially a blank script, except for there's some input parameters here to save time. So we have three user inputs. We have session New York, session Tokyo, and session London. Now you can override these to whatever values you want, but by default, these are set to the exchange time for Forex. This is for Forex trading primarily. And it is set up by default to reference these three sessions. And to do that, I'm just using the input.session function and passing in the default value of the corresponding 24-hour time based on the exchange time zone. So I'm on Oanda right now, or Oanda, on their price feed. So this is based on New York time. If we were to load up Bitcoin or crypto market, the exchange time would be different. So keep that in mind. This is purely for Forex markets. But the concepts I'll teach you here can be applied to any market. So let's get started. The very first thing we need to do is create a custom function to figure out if the current bar falls within one of these trading sessions. So to do that, I'm going to create a custom function that checks if the current bar falls within the given time session. So this function will be called isInSession, and it will take a single input parameter of SESS, short for session. And then I need to define this function. Now I've covered this in previous lessons, but basically what we need to do is check, is this value NA, the time function? If this function that we're about to use returns NA, this will return true. And then we know that the current bar is not within the session. So we need to add not on the front of here. So we don't want this time value to be NA. Now you can't use X equals NA in PineScript. This will not compile, or if it does compile, it will give you some funky results. The way to properly check if a value is NA is to use the inbuilt NA function. So we would say this same thing like this, NA, and then pass in the X. This will return true or false if the value is NA. This will not. This will kind of mess up the PineScript engine. So we need to use the NA function to check, is the time based on our current time frame dot period. So this is the 15-minute chart in this case. I'm on the 15-minute chart. Is the current 15-minute bar within our session parameter, this thing here, this guy here? If the current 15-minute bar falls within this session, time will not return NA, and then we know that we are within the session. So that's it for our custom function. This function will now tell us if the current bar is within any of these sessions. So the next thing we need to do is calculate the highs and lows for all of our sessions. So we'll start with the Tokyo session. I'll put all of my code for the Tokyo session between these two comments. The first thing we need to check is, have we just started the Tokyo session? Have we just started a new trading session in the Tokyo time zone? For this, we use our isInSession function, and we need to pass in our Tokyo session. Now, this will return true for every bar that is within the session. So we don't want that. What we actually want is to check and is is in session Tokyo on the previous bar. Were we not in session on the previous bar? So for example, let's say that this was where our session began. What this code will do is it will check, is this current bar in our Tokyo session? And was the previous bar not within the session? If this is true, then that means we have just begun trading within this Tokyo session for the day. Now, the next variable I need to create is a persistent VAR variable, or VAR operator. And this VAR variable is going to be called save TK, and it's going to be set to false by default. So it'll be initialized as false, and we need to override this later. Now, save TK is short for save Tokyo data. Do we want to start saving the high of the session, the low of the session, and the open and the close? The next thing we need to check is, have we exited the Tokyo session? So for this, we do the same thing as started Tokyo, but in the opposite direction. So we say is in session Tokyo 1, and not is in session on the current bar. So was the previous bar within the Tokyo session, and is the current bar no longer in the Tokyo session? That means we just exited the Tokyo time zone or time session. Once we have these two Boolean values, next up we need to save our open, high, low, and close for the trading session. So I need to create 4 variables here. We'll just call them TK high. That'll be set to 0.0. TK low will be set to, let's set it to 999999999.9. The reason we're setting this to such a high number is that it will ensure that when the session starts, the first low of the session will be lower than this number, and we will begin saving the low of the session. It'll make more sense when we get to the code that actually saves this data. But next we need to get the TK open. That can be set to 0.0, and TK close also 0.0. So now we have all of the data we need, all of the variables prepared that we need in order to track the session data for this trading session. All that's left to do is to check when the session begins, when the session ends, and to track our high and low in between. So if we've entered Tokyo session, prepare our variables. So if started TK, so if we have just entered the Tokyo session, then we need to save our open price. Then we need to set save TK to true, so that later in the script we know that the session has begun and we have been tracking the data. So this value here will be used to track the high and low throughout the session. So now we've set our save Tokyo session flag to true. We need to override our open, Tokyo open with the current opening price. We need to override our Tokyo high to 0.0 to reset it to 0.0 in case this isn't the very first session that we've encountered on our chart. And we also need to reset TK low to this large number. And that's it for the start of the session. We've saved the session open price. We've told the script that we now want to track the high and low of this session. And we have reset the high and low to its original values for this session. The next thing we need to do is check if we've exited the Tokyo session. Then we want to save the closing price of that session. So if exited TK is true, that means we are no longer trading within the Tokyo session. So now if we have exited the Tokyo session, we need to save the closing price of the previous bar, because that means that the session has ended. And if exited TK is true, that means that we were in session on the previous bar, but are no longer on the current bar. So what we need to say here is, if we've exited the Tokyo session, then set TK close to the previous closing price. And we want to set TK save to false, because we no longer want to track the high and low on the current bar if we have exited the session. And that's why I saved it to the end to track out high and low. So now I can say, if we're within the Tokyo session, save the highest high, lowest low. So to do that, I check if save TK, And if the current bar's high is greater than TK high, then override TK high with the current bar's high. And same with our low. If the current bar's low is less than our TK low value, then override TK low with the current bar's low. And that is it. We are tracking our session data, the open, the high, the low, the close of the Tokyo session. All that's left to do now is plot the bar to our chart. So for this, I'm going to use the plot bar function, and I only want to plot this bar when we exit the trading session. So when the Tokyo session ends, then I want to plot the bar. I don't want to have bars all over the place. I just want to plot the bar at the end of each session. So for that, I need to check, have we exited the Tokyo session? If so, create me a bar with TK open as the open price. Otherwise, set the open price to NA. And then I need to copy this line of code 3 more times and change these to open, high, low, and close. So we have TK open, TK high, TK low, and TK close. And then finally, I need to give this a color. Let's set this to purple. And let's title this Tokyo session. Get rid of our plot NA. Save the script, see if we get any errors. And we did get an error here because I have a typo here, TK save. It's actually save TK. Let me save that code, fix that mistake there. And now we have our candle drawing onto the chart. So I'm hovering over this 5 a.m. candle here. This candle is the candle that begins at 5 a.m. and so it closes at 5:15 a.m., which means these two candles are no longer in our trading session. And so what we are getting here is the closing price of this previous bar and the high and the low of the Tokyo trading session. So the session opened here. It has a tiny wick on top of that opening candle. Then we fell all the way down here. This is the low of the session. And we closed right here on this bar. So that gives us the trading data for this trading session as a custom bar drawing onto the chart. You could represent this information using something other than a bar. You could draw horizontal lines or there's all kinds of ways you could represent this information. I chose to go with bars just because it's an easy way to visually, quickly see the data at the end of each session. And so when the next session begins, you have a few key levels to reference based on what happened during the previous major trading session. All that is left to do now is copy this code 2 more times and just change all of the sessions that are referenced to the appropriate session. So we have London and New York here as well. So let me do that really quickly and then I'll come back to wrap up the lesson. All right, there we have it. So I have my Tokyo session code here. I literally just copied this, pasted it below and changed everything to say London and put in our London session instead of the Tokyo session. Other than that, the code is identical. Same for the New York session. We're just passing in our New York session variable from the settings menu. One thing I haven't done is I need to title these plots. So this is New York session, and this is title London session. Tokyo session, done. So that's our script done. That's our session candles script completed. An interesting example, I think, of how to use sessions and custom candles to plot interesting and useful data onto our charts. Now you could also set overlay to false and move this into its own pane. You could plot candles if you wanted to instead of bars. I think it's more useful to see this data over price action. So that's the style I went with, but it's obviously up to you how you represent this data in your scripts. Anyway, that will do it for this lesson. As always, the source code is below for you to poke around and play around with, and I'll speak with you in the next lesson.